C Taylor Fritz, and our presentation is on augmented and virtual reality. We've split up our presentation into virtual and augmented reality, but they follow the same format. So we're going to start by explaining what each one is, why someone would use it, the different advantages and disadvantages of each, the different human factors, concerns for both, different types of examples, and how you would use it for each, and then how the DoD has implemented both. Virtual reality is the opposite of the real environment we live in every day. Virtual reality creates a realistic world where users can have different kinds of experiences in an artificial environment. As you can see from the image, virtual and augmented reality live on a spectrum, but in 100% virtual reality, all of a user's senses are disoriented and translated into basically a different world. What the user sees, hears, even sometimes feels and smells are in the context of this virtual reality. The user is unaware of their actual physical surroundings, which, as you will see later on, has different advantages and disadvantages. Next slide, please. There are an endless number of possibilities on how you can use virtual reality. I'll go more into depth later of exactly how the DoD uses virtual reality in training for different scenarios and as a teaching tool in aircraft. But the reason why people use virtual reality for training and teaching is because it provides a safe environment you don't need to be afraid to mess up in. The consequences of crashing an aircraft in a virtual reality situation are very, very minimal compared to crashing an actual aircraft. Another situation where virtual reality allows users to apply skills in a controlled environment is, for example, firefighters. In reality, you can't prepare or practice fighting a fire without a real fire. With virtual reality, you can practice extinguishing a fire, practice new techniques that you would otherwise wouldn't practice in real time, and expedite the training pipeline in a variety of fields. Similarly to the pilot and firefighter training, doctors and medical professionals can use virtual reality to practice on fake patients. Virtual reality is really just extremely valuable in any high-stakes situation. Less crucially, virtual reality can also be used for entertainment and art. It's like watching a movie, but you're completely immersed and you can interact with what's going on around you. This could be really cool for experiencing museums or visiting landmarks you can't readily get to. This picture shows someone experiencing yoga through virtual reality, and like I said, the possibilities are really endless on ways to incorporate this concept into your daily life. If you've ever seen the TV show Upload, it takes the concept of virtual reality to the extreme and allows people to experience a reality that they are completely immersed in as an afterlife, and living people can visit them in this virtual reality environment. Next slide, please. While virtual reality has already proven irreplaceable for high-stakes situation training, it can be used for a lot of everyday experiences that have now been limited due to COVID. Experiences we used to take granted, like concerts, can still be experienced with virtual reality. Bands could even find a way to hold a virtual concert live, so you really are experiencing the band perform right in front of you. One of, I think, the most valuable things virtual reality could be used for now with COVID is creating a school environment. I think everyone agrees being on a Teams call for class is not as effective as being in the physical classroom, especially for young children. And it's so easy to get distracted by your surroundings when you're just looking at a computer screen. Virtual reality could really open doors for education and ensure young kids can still get a classroom experience. Similarly, it can be used for communicating for really any type of work meeting to increase productivity and communication. Not only would having virtual reality available for school and work be extremely useful with the current COVID conditions, it also just provides the advantage of being convenient. For companies that are already virtual or companies that allow people to work remotely from home, having the option to use virtual reality as a tool instead of driving all the way to work just to have a face-to-face conversation would be extremely convenient and useful. Using virtual reality for the things I mentioned in the last slide, such as visiting a landmark or fighting a fire for training, are much cheaper than actually doing those things in real life. On the other sides of costs as well, companies could be using virtual reality as a marketing tool. Companies and museums could be selling virtual tours and bands could be selling these virtual live concerts. So it's a win-win situation. Lastly, as I mentioned in the last slide, but is such a huge advantage, is the ability to use virtual reality as a safe place to complete training missions with very minimal risk. Next slide. There are also some disadvantages to using virtual reality. These include simulator sickness and nausea after an extended period of time, discomfort from the gear, which could potentially be pretty heavy. And despite virtual reality saving costs for high risk training, it's still relatively expensive for individuals to own devices that are right now often used for video games and could be used for the experiences I mentioned earlier. One solution for the simulator sickness is to provide less jumpy graphic transitions. And for the discomfort, designers could provide individualized and personally fitted equipment. They also make something I learned called a boom viewer from Fake Space Labs, which hangs suspended in front of the viewer's face, not on it. So it's not as heavy and tiring to wear as the head mounted displays. Next slide, please. Going along with the disadvantages, there are some concerns, or again, disadvantages directly related to human factors. The loss of situational awareness has the potential to be very dangerous. If you are deep into your virtual reality simulation in every sense, you may not even be aware if an emergency is happening in reality around you if you're alone. For example, you may not smell a fire, hear a fire alarm, or even feel like a spill around you. Designers and engineers need to be aware of this problem to create signals that notify the user of a potential situation going around them that they otherwise wouldn't notice. For example, if the noise in real life gets above a certain level, the virtual reality system could start flashing at the user to get their attention. There's a lot of other ways too that different types of virtual reality systems could get users' attention, such as sounds or visual cues. With regards to training, either for flying an aircraft or in a medical environment, if the virtual reality training does not exactly transfer to the real life situation, there could be deadly consequences. For example, if the vibrations you're used to feeling in the cockpit simulator to let you know, for example, you're stalling, if these are 5 seconds delayed in the simulator, you may be confused when you start feeling that same vibration in the actual aircraft. Especially with planes such as the A-10, where your first flight is a solo and the only experience you have beforehand is in the simulators, you need to know exactly what you'll expect. Similarly, training in a simulator can give you false security when creating bad habits. You may be able to get away with doing things slightly wrong in a simulator without much repercussions and feel less urgency to fix these bad habits with such little consequences on the line. But once you get into an actual plane, it will be hard to fix the bad habits you've already created. Lastly, there is the potential to become detached from reality or rely on this fake reality and create a false perception of where you live. It's already a common concern seen with people becoming too attached to video games, and this would skyrocket with virtual reality. People may use it to escape from the pressures of life and take it to an extreme by trying to only live within this fake world that they've created. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, virtual reality is a scale, and there's more than one type of virtual reality. There's immersive virtual reality, desktop virtual reality, projection virtual reality, and simulation virtual reality. There are currently a variety of different devices that all allow a different experience or level of virtual reality. The most commonly known is head-mounted displays. They also make glasses and contact lenses that would probably be a lot more comfortable to wear for a long period of time. Less commonly known forms of virtual reality is fiber optic wired gloves, position tracking devices, and apparently audio systems that provide 3D sound. In some cases, there's a treadmill interface to simulate the experience of walking through virtual space. In these types of devices, the user is in real time placed inside a generated image, which is given assigned properties to make it look and feel real in terms of visual perception and sometimes even tactile perception. Next slide, please. One thing I found interesting that I read just in the textbook is that virtual reality can be used in a medical sense, not just for training, but for curing people and to be used as a therapy. For example, it can be used to treat patients with a fear of heights. The virtual reality gives them an immersive experience with control over their viewpoint and movement. The safe environment allows people with phobias to face their fears and prepare to face similar experiences in the real world. Similarly, virtual reality is used for military personnel suffering with PTSD. The virtual reality allows them to relive these traumatic experiences as part of their therapy. Next slide, please. Virtual reality has become increasingly popular in sports. In football, NFL teams and college programs alike have already begun incorporating the technology into their practices. At least 3 NFL teams that I know of, the Dallas Cowboys, New England Patriots, and San Francisco 49ers, are using this technology to practice without stepping on the field and risking injury. This is a huge benefit for college schools who use this technology, such as Auburn University, Vanderbilt University, and the University of Arkansas, because they have a max number of hours players can practice and study film each week. Especially with film study sessions, virtual reality can simulate actual game conditions, making it way more effective. Similarly, virtual reality is also being used in NASCAR. In a NBC Sports feature, it was mentioned that advancements in virtual reality has more or less made actual and simulated realities virtually indistinguishable. By blurring the lines that separate the real from the virtual reality has now become the ideal means of supplementing work on the field, on the rink, on the court to further athletes' skills and knowledge of the game. Even soccer teams in the MLS are using virtual reality as a training method. Soccer is also leading the way in watching sports from a virtual reality environment by allowing fans to view the match from otherwise inaccessible positions. And while there are already several virtual reality video games, there's currently one virtual poker game available called Casino VR Poker, which has held several professional poker tournaments and cash games. Next slide, please. As I have been mentioning throughout this presentation, virtual reality has proven to be an extremely useful tool for the DoD to use in the context of training and even preparing soldiers for what they may experience in combat to help them run through and prepare for different situations. For example, reenacting engagement with an enemy in different types of unknown environments. Other specific types of military use of virtual reality include flight simulation, medic battlefield training, virtual boot camp, vehicle simulation, and parachute training. Generally, they use head-mounted displays and data gloves to be able to interact with objects in the virtual environment. The main advantages of using virtual reality in the military is it saves money and time. While the military doesn't necessarily use this virtual reality to replace real-life training, it's a very useful additional tool. One thing that I read that I thought was very interesting was the Navy's use of virtual reality. They have made full use of virtual reality in the form of submarine simulators, which mimic the actions of a real submarine. These simulators are mounted onto hydraulic arms, which pitch and roll as a real submarine would. This is super useful when trying to recreate the actions of a submarine when it dives or ascends. There are other simulators which are static but show changes in instrument readings as part of the simulation. Trainees must react to these changes as if they were on board a real submarine. They can replicate real-life emergencies, which the trainees respond to, but in a safe, controlled environment. For the virtual reality used in pilot training, the Air Force has created cockpits with controls just as seen in real-world aircraft and replicates the movements associated with flying. The pilot controls the simulator by using a joystick which has force feedback, thereby allowing them to experience how it responds when it moves. The flight simulator is an enclosed unit based on a motion platform, which has, I learned, which has 6 degrees of movement and responds to changes in weather, turbulence, and battlefield conditions. It's mainly used to train pilots, but apparently can also be used as part of aircraft research and development. The aim for all of this training is for the pilot to experience a sense of immersion and to feel as if they're actually flying a real aircraft with the controls that they would experience in real life conditions. This means that it is crucial for the simulator to have the same setup as the actual aircraft and move in a realistic way. If not, then the training session is basically ineffective and can actually do damage. If the movements of the simulator are inconsistent with the mental model that the pilot has in their mind, they could easily get flustered when they get into the aircraft and it's not what they expected. One last way that I thought was really interesting on how the DoD incorporated virtual reality was through weapons. There's a range of weapons specially designed for virtual reality military training. Some of the ones that I found were called VR guns, armored vehicles, and submarines, which launch virtual torpedoes. These virtual weapons are similar in size, shape, and appearance to their real-life counterparts, but do not cause harm to their owners. They're used during virtual reality combat training and simulations that are designed to instruct new pilots in the different skills and techniques needed for frontline action. These weapons allow their owner to track and shoot a target just to simulate the real world experience. Plus, they learn the correct ways of handling a weapon. One of the more recent innovations that I found was the virtual torpedoes. A fleet of submarines are equipped with an onboard simulator, which is connected to synthetic targets. The software allows the crew to fire a virtual torpedo at a synthetic target as part of a training exercise. Then they can analyze that data and use it in their training process. Every single branch has incorporated virtual reality in some aspect to their training. With COVID changing the way that people interact, I think we're about to see a huge increase in virtual reality research and training. Even at the Air Force Academy, there's an endless number of ways to incorporate virtual reality for our education, training, and flying. We could use virtual environments as classrooms, complete more hands-on training this way, and allow certain flying programs to continue practice despite COVID or weather issues as well. Next slide.
I'm now going to go into the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality. Augmented reality is most of the benefits of virtual reality while still remaining in the real world. It really incorporates superimposed images and graphics laid over the user's natural world. The most common application is seen in social media and the filters that many of the younger generations and even the older generations that are getting into technology use. Many use it every day without truly appreciating the technology that's behind it. It is preferred in many cases over virtual reality because it does not fully superimpose the real world, so it leaves some semblance of reality involved. I have decided to show you this image once again to show you where on the scale augmented reality exists. Augmented reality is the closest you can get to the real world with technology applications. It truly capitalizes on the user's want and need for an enhanced experience while still giving them the option to see what their real world looks like. So why use augmented reality? Augmented reality allows for an extension of reality. In things like medical practices and military training, it can make the user and operator more knowledgeable and therefore increase their capability. Specifically, in medical practices, it can help the doctors and surgeons superimpose X-ray images, which can make their jobs more efficient and cause less pain for the subject being operated upon. Augmented reality also increases attention and popularity of products. The need, in this technology-engrossed world, for an amplified reality causes an increase of value to things like augmented reality. For users, it seems aesthetic, technologically advanced, and applicable in the world, and therefore they will pay money for it. So many businesses see that as a business opportunity and capitalize upon it. Augmented reality also addresses an increase of stability, accuracy, and productivity in the training environment. It does that because you're superimposing these images so you can hit those targets accurately. It's more stable because you're confident in your ability, and the productivity increases because it can tell you where you're going wrong, what you're doing right in the real world. Finally, it allows the perfect bridge for virtual reality because it is a perfect medium point for people who are not sure if they want a completely changed environment. Advantages of augmented reality. The entire idea of augmented reality is to make reality advantageous for the user. But there are a few key factors that separate the benefits of augmented reality to the downfalls. Augmented reality increases the engagement of the user and the technology which is using augmented reality. While that may not be entirely beneficial to the user, it is very beneficial to the company using AR. They capitalize on it because the user sees it as a need that they have to have in their technology, and that becomes another way for them to make money. Augmented reality also increases aesthetic value, as I mentioned previously. Technology is very important for gaining user satisfaction, and by having an advanced technology like augmented reality, more people will consider the application popular and useful. Augmented reality is entirely mobile. Almost every single time we use augmented reality in the real world, it's on a mobile phone. While there are some applications of augmented reality into DoD, medical, and other fields, really where we see it the most is social media. Because it's mobile, almost all of the population can access it if they have access to smartphones. As it does not need separate technology to fully immerse the user, it is considerably cheaper than virtual reality because it's already built into your phone that you already bought for other purposes. I'm not buying a whole nother headset just to have augmented reality. However, that's not to say that it's cheap overall. The system to create augmented reality is really important because if you pay a lot of money, you're going to have a much better product. But if you pay a little bit of money, you're going to have a product that is augmented reality, but it's not going to look very good, and therefore the user is not going to want to pay money for it. Finally, augmented reality is applicable in every domain, from medical to military to social media. It is used and has proven to enhance experiences in both training and real world activities. This image that I showed you is I found off Google, and it really just shows what the who enjoys augmented reality and who wants it in their life. Um, Although it does show a heads up display which goes more towards virtual reality, you can still use a heads up display for augmented reality. It'll just look a little bit different. For the heads up display for augmented reality, you're going to be taking a recording of your natural world. That's why it's preferred to use a mobile phone, because you can look up from your phone and see the world and then look down at your phone and see the augmented reality. However, if you want that fully immersive experience, it'll take the recording of the world around you and superimpose that image so that you're not fully into a virtual reality because it's still what you're seeing in the real world, but you're not going to have the separation between the phone and the real world. So now getting into some disadvantages of augmented reality, there are some that go between human factors concerns and just general success disadvantages. For general disadvantages, there's a large concern for a lack of privacy. In order for augmented reality to work on a social media video recording app, it must take in and process/record the environment. This is a serious security issue because it will record individuals' private lives even when the record button is not being pressed. This is in the context of the heads up display or in the glasses display, like you can see in the picture here. Because you're not having the ability to look up and see what the natural world is around you, it needs to record what your natural world is so it can superimpose those images. However, if you're using it on your phone, it's not going to be recording it, but it will be taking in that data and processing it. Additionally, as it is advanced technology that is relatively new, the interface does have flaws. The quality of it may be lacking, especially in programs that did not spend copious amounts of money. You can really see that in the filters that you use. Some of the people that create the filters, obviously it's a capital, they're trying to gain capital off of it. Some, like if you go on Snapchat, you can have one filter that is really good quality and you can barely tell that it's augmented reality. It really superimposed on your face. It was able to track your movements. But then you also have some filters that you can tell weren't spent time and money on. And those you can tell don't track the movements on your face. Maybe they look a little shoddy. They don't look like they really match up very much. Speaking of money, augmented reality takes a lot to enable within programs. As with anything in life, more money will provide better technological results. Finally, the last three disadvantages of augmented reality can really be grouped into one idea, which is the diminishment of reality. It can affect people's mental health as it separates people from the real world, and it can severely affect the satisfaction with one's life the way it is naturally. You can see that a lot now with beauty filters. A lot of people, especially maybe not in our generation, but the generation before us, really don't like taking selfies or pictures without that beauty filter on because they like the way they look in that augmented reality world. So it's important to be able to separate from what is real and what's not. And unfortunately, with the increase in technology, that's becoming harder and harder every day. Going into some human factor concerns, it's very much close to the same as virtual reality. Comfort for the user. Whether you're using it on your mobile phone or in a heads up display, it's going to be strain on the eye. It's also going to be hard for your brain to process, to see all these different flashing and having these verbal and visual cues. That can cause some overload. In the picture you can see on the right, they're fixing a device and it's showing what to touch, what not to touch, and what to turn and what not to turn, while also tracking the user's face. This can cause a lot of issues because if it's not perfectly lined up, if it's a centimeter off and you're trying to do something that's maybe minute or very detailed, you could miss the mark. There's also a lot of concerns for privacy and safety, as I talked about earlier. Privacy is a really, really big one because there's no way to superimpose an image if you're not recording the virtual or the reality around you. And then safety, going back to what I was saying, if it's a couple degrees off, a couple inches off, even a couple millimeters off, if you're doing something that's so technical that that matters, then you can really injure yourself or others. So here are some examples of augmented reality. Pokemon Go, that I'm pretty sure that was the first widespread use of augmented reality in the general population. I know for me personally, it was my senior year of high school, and I went out with my family on family walks to see this augmented reality and really understand what the app was. We also use augmented reality in Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook for the filters. You have like the dog filter, which goes on your face, but you also have some that will superimpose a shark or an animal or some kind of um, thing in your surrounding environment. There's also medical and engineering advancements. I mentioned earlier about how it could make surgery more efficient. I know when I got my kidney surgery a couple weeks ago, they used augmented reality, and the way that they did it is they had these headsets that they wore, and while they were doing the surgery, it superimposed the image of my CT scan so they could figure out exactly where the issues were so that they could pinpoint it and grab it before. That way they didn't have to go around and search or maybe make other cuts or make mistakes. So it just made it way more efficient and made it so that not only the user was satisfied with the efficiency, but the person who was getting operated upon was happy because it made it less painful. Engineering advancements, as you saw in the picture before, it can show people who maybe don't have the experience as an engineer what they can do to fix an issue. You can use it in houses, you can use it in architecture, you can use it in all these things so that things are more stable, you're more efficient, and you're more confident in the ability of your advancements. Training and military applications, I'll get into the next slide. However, it's really going to be using like heads up displays, what you can do to really motivate your user to use the augmented reality to their advantage. And then the biggest one that I see nowadays is shopping visualization. You can see here in the picture, this is something from IKEA. And what they've done is you choose the product that you want, and then you hold your phone up and it will superimpose the product wherever you're pointing your phone. So you can really get a feel, and it's to scale. So you can really get a feel as to what that piece of furniture or that product will look like in your environment specifically. However, this really goes back to that safety and privacy concern because IKEA is now getting that data of what your surrounding area looks like. And there's this pretty awesome quote that says, if you're not paying for it, which this application is free, then you're probably the thing people are paying for. So IKEA will make money off of possibly selling your data to the highest bidder, and you don't know who that is, which causes a lot of privacy concerns. So now going into DoD and capstone implications, Bridget and I have the really awesome opportunity to be on the same capstone. So I'll first go over what augmented reality looks like in the DoD, and then we can kind of touch a little bit on what that does in our capstone application. So as far as the DoD, training for pilots, training for operations, these are really good training tools because you're not going fully immersed into virtual reality. You still get to see a little bit of your surrounding environment. While virtual reality leads the way in training and immersement, augmented reality allows the user to truly incorporate technology into their everyday life. The DoD cannot use augmented reality in the same context as virtual reality, but it can still be important. Right now, the best example of augmented design is heads-up displays for pilots, as it will superimpose images and targets for the pilot to have everything they need be on the display on their head, rather than them having to turn around in the cockpit, look at different displays, maybe talk to their individuals on the ground. It'll all be in one location so that they can access it easily. As we go, uh, it eliminates the need for the pilot to turn back and forth in the cockpit, therefore helping from a human factors point of view, because you're not going to have to take your eyes off of what you're doing in the moment. And it also isn't fully virtual reality, which would also be another human factor concern, because you can still see your surrounding environment, you can still feel the surrounding environment, and you're not fully immersed. It's just superimposed. As we go from a less technological world to one that depends on the creation of new things, we need to learn how to incorporate more technology into our everyday life, and augmented reality is the perfect bridge to do so if we're not ready to dive headfirst into virtual reality. As far as our capstone, Bridget and I are working on a radio frequency geolocation, which involves a drone. And that drone is going to tell us where a radio signal is so that the special operations ground troops can accurately find it and destroy it. So the possibility to utilize a visualization of the drone. We've talked about possibly having a heads up display for the drone driver. However, the issue that we saw with that was a special operations team only has so many people, and to have one person fully immersed in the drone wouldn't be conducive to that environment. So a application of augmented reality is to have maybe glasses, or even on the phone you can fly it the way you want to fly it, but you still are looking at your uh, environment around you. It's just maybe in a corner, or it's another area. That way you can still use your environment and still be applicable to the team. Additionally, the directional vector would be superimposed on the terrain reality. Whether we want to make it just the pilot or what we want to do, once they get those coordinates of the radio signal, we are planning on having a directional vector. And if the pilot can have that superimposed in his environment, he will always know what direction to go, regardless of if there's mountains, trees, or anything like that. And it won't be as confusing as having it on a mobile device, say in the hand. And really just the application of real world technology. Our adversaries are really increasing in their ability to make their technology matter. And I think that if we're not with them on that curve, we're going to be left behind. But overall, virtual reality and augmented reality have very influential applications in both the DoD and natural world. So we hope that you enjoyed our presentation. If you have any questions, please contact us at our emails for USAFA. But other than that, thank you for listening and have a great day.